In the near darkness, on top of a plowed snowbank, Jerry made a nest for himself, perched above the vehicle shooting past on the highway. He was winded from carrying the heavy gas can through the snow at this high elevation. His tongue nervously flicked from one cheek to the other as he contemplated what he had to do. Looking up the highway, he could no longer see the outline of the mountain against the night sky. 2 minutes. Jerry twisted the top off the gas can and pulled the lighter from his pocket. "Dear God, please don't let anyone be hurt or killed as a result of my actions," he said aloud. He looked at the traffic and looked at the mountain. 1 minute. At the first break in traffic, he stood up, poured gasoline down the snowbank, tossed gas as far out on the road as he could, then heaved the half-empty can. It flew through the air, hit the pavement, and rolled, spewing more gas over the macadam surface. When he touched his lighter to the gas-soaked snow, flames hissed down the snowbank, across the road, and exploded in a billowing ball of orange and yellow flame. Jerry shielded his face from the scorching heat. One of the oncoming cars slid into the flames, spinning in a circle as it shot through the crackling inferno and plowed trunk first into the snowbank on the other side of the fiery wall. There was no screeching of tires in the hard-packed snow, only the silent twirling of braking cars and the soft sound of their collision with the snowbanks. This was followed by the tortured crunch of metal as a few of the cars ran into each other. The explosion, hundreds of yards up the highway, sent an unseen cloud of rock and snow into the night sky. The repercussion knocked Jerry off his feet into the snowbank. Moments later, the gasoline had burned away. The only illumination came from auto headlights aimlessly stabbing the night in every direction. A broken radiator hissed. Someone was crying. There was swearing and car doors slamming. When Jerry reached the top of the rubble blocking the highway, he looked back to see auto headlights curving down the mountainside like a string of Christmas tree lights. The bloody security man led Garth through milling throngs to the dining room where more people, most of them strangers, formed a large circle around a table of men in the center of the room. "There," he said, pointing to a huge bearded man wearing a coyote head as a hat. The man sat at the end of a table surrounded by bikers. Standing on top of the table was a terrified young woman of 18 or 19, wearing only her bra and panties. "Take 'em off!" bellowed the big man. He raised the whiskey bottle to his lips, took a long drink, and then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and passed the bottle to the biker beside him. Garth counted 11. And he thought their frenzied laughing spoke of unsound minds. "That's enough," he yelled, taking the woman's hand and helping her off the table. "Get back to your dome, Peggy." She looked at Garth through tear-filled eyes and whimpered, "Why didn't she listen to Dalton?" Then sprinted into the crowd and was gone. "Who the hell do you think you're screwing with?" growled the big man, coming to his feet. Garth met his hate-filled eyes. He was at least 6'2" and had to weigh 250 pounds. His unkempt beard reached to his belt buckle. His face was pockmarked. His 2 brown front teeth were broken, and his drooping jowls quivered as he chewed on his hostility, spitting out the words. He raised a short-barreled 12-gauge pump and slammed the butt down on the table. The thwack echoed through the room, hushing the murmuring crowd. Garth shouted angrily, "You're on autonomy property, and sheriff's patrols are on their way here now. I'd advise that you leave before they arrive." Oh, we're so afraid," laughed one of the bikers. "This is our property now," said another. We're the law from here on out, ain't we, Wolf?" said another. "Right," snarled Wolf. He plodded around the table to come face to face with Garth. He paused, smiled a gap-toothed smile, and threw the butt of the shotgun into Garth's stomach. Garth crumpled, gasping, to the floor, where Wolf kicked him in the face, raking a boot spur across his neck. "Nobody screws with me, pretty boy." "Get out of here," Garth mumbled through broken teeth, struggling to stand. Blood poured from the cut on his neck. Wolf's foot shot out again, catching him with a glancing blow to the temple that spun him around to fall flat on his back, unconscious. "Stop it, you animal!" screamed a woman, rushing to Garth's aid. She was joined by 2 others. Wolf tossed his head back and laughed, a demented, maniacal laugh that chilled the listeners. "You 3 done volunteered your sexual services." The bikers grabbed the 3 women. Wolf vaulted onto the tabletop, pumped a shell into the chamber of the shotgun, and circled slowly. "We always grateful for sexual volunteers," he shouted. "Stop it!" someone yelled. "Where's Dalton?" screamed a woman. One of the commune's male members burst through the crowd screaming, "Bonnie! Bonnie! Bonnie!" Eyes crazed in horror, he ran toward the men holding one of the women. Wolf was leveling the shotgun at him when Stephanie stepped out of the crowd and into his field of vision. She was dressed in a white robe, and with her right hand she drew a large pentagram in the air. She looked at Wolf, then turned to the crowd and said, "Someone find Dr. Kaufman." Returning her attention to Wolf, she said, "Who are you?"
"Yeah, your worst nightmare," he laughed.
"Let's talk, but not here," she said, walking over to the men holding the women. "Let them go." When the men didn't respond, Stephanie looked up at Wolf. He hesitated, then nodded to his men to release the women.
"Where?"
Wolf bellowed. Stephanie nodded toward the back stairs and led the way through the crowd. Wolf and 2 companions followed. From the sanctuary level, they took the elevator to Stephanie's apartment in the apex of the pyramid. The doors opened into the lavish living room.
"Do you believe this shit?" cackled one of the men. "Shut up, Snake," Wolf growled.
From the point of the apex hung a huge cluster of crystals emitting an eerie bluish glow. The room was a cylinder. The only outside illumination came from the glass point of the apex. On the other side of the circular walls were the bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and meditation room. White couches curved along the rosewood wall halfway around the room. The floor was white marble with a fire-red mosaic pentagram set into the floor. In the middle of the pentagram was a white wire designer's chair, hardly noticeable. Stephanie strolled to the white chair and sat down. "Take a seat, gentlemen," she said. The 3 men settled on different sections of the couch. Snake put his boots on the white velour. "Now, exactly what is it you want?" Stephanie asked calmly. Wolf laughed, his psychotic laugh.
"Everything you got, sister, and I'll start with you,"
he snarled, looking directly into her eyes. "That won't do," she replied.
"Won't do? Won't do?"
he roared. He stood up, shaking his head disbelievingly, and swaggered towards her, laughing. When his foot hit the red edge of the pentagram, the laugh turned into a howl of pain. He leaped back, screeching unintelligibly. "You're dealing with forces you don't understand," Stephanie said calmly as the big man danced on one foot.
"Grog, grab her!"
Wolf snarled. Grog looked from the pentagram to Wolf and back at Stephanie.
"Hey, man, I don't know." "I said grab her!"
Wolf screamed, his eyes fixed on Stephanie. Grog leaped at the woman. As he hit the red line, his body spasmed against the unseen force before twisting backward. He screeched in pain. Wolf raised the pump shotgun and aimed it directly at Stephanie.
"You think your magic will stop this, bitch?"
"I think it will kill you if you try," Stephanie replied. Wolf's expression changed. He eased his finger off the trigger and snarled,
"Snake, go get the purdy boy from the dining room."
Stephanie's eyes narrowed. Wolf began to pace around the outer edge of the pentagram.
You're safe as long as you in there, girlie. But your voodoo ain't enough to save your followers now, is it?
She watched him as he circled like a predatory wolf around a campfire. But the more she tried to concentrate upon him, the more he became a figure from her past. He had watched her like this. He had circled her. He had snuck into her room at night and carried her away before she could awaken. Afterward, he had threatened her in ways that assured she would never report him. And when she was 13, Mr. Billows had paid for his deeds.
What is this?
Billows asked, ripping the silver pentacle necklace from her neck.
Your karma,
she said, backing away. Red-faced and trembling, he hissed.
This is a Christian school. Are you using this to curse me?
To protect myself. An unbalanced little giggle squeezed its way through his clenched teeth. His eyes bulged.
Who taught you such things?
She didn't say.
Well, obviously, I need to spend more time with you, my little Stephanie.
2 days later, Ralph Stanley Billows, a primary counselor at the Windsor Taylor School for Girls, fell down the marble stairs in Memory Hall and broke his neck. From that day on, Stephanie knew that no one would snatch her from her bed again. In her head, she knew it, but her heart was still afraid. "The only time I feel safe sleeping is between the two of you," she would say to Dalton and Garth.
"Well, we're not complaining," Dalton laughed.
Wolf continued to pace around the circle, carefully staying outside the red mosaic line. Stephanie watched his mad pacing, his blubbery belly bouncing with each thudding footfall. As Wolf passed directly in front of her, she said, "Can you perceive the retribution that awaits you?"
Retribution? You mean that eye for an eye shit?
He cackled and bobbed up and down.
Sister, it's about the survival of the fittest, and nobody is fitter than me.
He patted his stomach with one hand while holding the 12 gauge in the air with the other. Circling 2 more times, he stopped in front of her.
Ooh, you say you talk to spirits, huh?
He looked directly into her icy blue eyes.
Well, know what? I think them spirits are talking to me now, too. Yep. They're saying, skin that pretty boy.
He pulled a switchblade from his pocket and jabbed the button. The blade snapped out and glinted in the light.
Yep. They saying, Wolf, you skin that pretty boy if sister don't come out and join the party.
"You've bought us a couple days, Dalton, but what good is it going to do?" Jerry asked as they curved slowly down off the mountain. Dalton shook his head and shrugged in answer. A nearly full moon illuminated the cloud-shrouded sky, bathing the mountain in an eerie glow reflected from the luminous snow. On every curve, the Bronco's 4-wheel drive strained to hold traction on the slippery, snow-packed highway. By the light of the open glove compartment, Jerry loaded 20 308 cartridges into each of a dozen HK-91 clips and taped them in 2s for fast flip-flop reloads. On the radio, Bob Dylan sang North Country Blues. Since closing the pass, they hadn't seen a single car coming out of the Bitterroot Valley. Nobody was trying to leave Montana. It took nearly an hour to reach the West Fork turnoff, where cars and trucks were parked in the plowed snow along Highway 93 as far as Dalton could see in the Bronco's high beams. On the intersecting road to Autonomy, cars straddled the gravel 3 abreast all the way out to the highway.
"Good Lord, we're still 15 miles from the commune," Jerry said, his voice echoing Dalton's shocked look.
"And the only way we're going to get home is to walk," Dalton added. Downshifting, he purposely drove the Bronco into an 8-foot mountain of plowed snow. Bucking and shimmying, it dug in, lurching upward, the 4 big tires whining and throwing up blizzards of snow. The interior cargo in the back shifted, crashing from side to side until the vehicle topped the snowbank. They came to rest at an odd angle, looking down on the intersection of the Bitterroot River and the West Fork tributary. "Do I go in armed?" Jerry asked, hoisting the assault rifle as he climbed out of the car. Dalton shook his head. "I promised Stephanie." Then, giving the rifle a long look, he said, "But that doesn't mean we can't hide it along the road somewhere close to the entrance. Grab an extra poncho and bring the ammo clips." Shortly after the gravel road had been plowed, the cars and trucks had begun arriving. The drivers had gone as far as they could before abandoning their vehicles to walk to autonomy. The result was miles of cars parked 2 and sometimes 3 abreast, blocking anyone trying to get into or out of the commune and ranches that bordered the river.
"If the ranchers disliked us before, can you imagine how they feel now?"
Jerry quipped. An hour's steady tramping between the vehicles put them 6 or 7 miles closer to the commune. Sometimes, rather than fighting the snowdrifts, it was easier to walk across the roofs of the vehicles, jumping from car to car. A rancher's stock truck filled with bellowing cattle had slewed sideways in the road.
"Poor bastard was probably trying to turn around when the faithful blocked any chance of retreat,"
Jerry said, commenting on the obvious.
"Yeah, well, the cattle will stand a better chance on the run,"
Dalton said, jerking the ramp free and dropping it in the snow. He swung up on the truck and released the gate. The cattle stood looking at him stupidly. He climbed down, walked to the unlocked cab, and honked the horn. The cattle clambered down the ramp and were quickly gone. An old psychedelic bus was abandoned in the middle of a sea of motorcycles. It was painted with peace signs, flowers, and slogans. "Don't eat meat," "One world," "Save water, shower with a friend," "Make love, not war."
"Too many bikers,"
Jerry said, twisting the handlebars of a Harley.
73 so far,"
Dalton said, concern in his voice. The temperature continued to drop. Dalton figured it was close to 0. This time he was dressed for it. 30 minutes later, Dalton caught a glimpse of movement several car lengths ahead. He dropped to the ground and Jerry followed suit without question. Dalton slipped off his glove, unzipped his parka, eased the .45 out of its shoulder holster, and racked the slide. He paused, motionless, his breath hanging in a cloud of condensation before gently drifting away. Minutes passed. The shadow appeared again, coming toward them. Dalton was lying near the rear wheel of a Chevy Suburban. Inching backward in the snow, he rolled under the rear bumper of the big 4-wheel drive vehicle, scooted back, and then rose to a crouch at the tailgate. He motioned Jerry to stay hidden. Snow caked the left side of Dalton's face. He wiped it out of his eye, eased the parka hood off his head, and maneuvered it around so he could breathe into it, hiding the steam of his breath. In the distance, a coyote wailed, the sound trilling mournfully across the frozen landscape. It was answered from another direction. Dalton scanned the terrain behind him and to the sides. An assortment of automobiles lay behind him. To his right, he could see past the cars into an empty white field. On his left, a car blocked the view of the field bordering the river. A second man could circle him from that direction. Whoever was coming through the row of deserted vehicles was being extremely careful. Soft padding on the snow, moving like a hunter. Dalton saw Jerry inch deeper into the frozen shadows, his HK-91 at ready. Remembering being stalked in Vietnam, Dalton decided he preferred bone-numbing Arctic cold to a sweaty, snake-infested jungle. You couldn't hear Luke the Gook creeping up on you, slithering through their slimy world, delivering death when least expected. So who was this guy? A crazed rancher? No, Dalton sensed a pro. Something crashed several cars behind him. Dalton resisted the urge to spin around. He instantly realized the stalker had thrown something ahead of him. Holding the .45 with both hands, crouched, he flattened his back against the suburban tailgate and listened to the almost silent sound of scrunching snow coming a little closer with each footfall. The elevator buzzed, the doors opened, and two empty-eyed bikers half-carried, half-dragged Garth into Stephanie's living room. Behind them snaked led a white-faced Joshua Kaufman, a switchblade held to the doctor's neck. Wolf pointed to the marble floor outside the pentagram, and the bikers dropped Garth. He hit the floor head first and lay still. Blood oozed from beneath him. Stephanie silently prayed for Garth. "Please let me help him," Joshua pleaded, looking from Wolf to Garth's crumpled form. Snake said, "Doc here says a pretty boy might die."
"Well, not before I skin him,"
Wolf bellowed, looking at Stephanie. He leered and stuck his tongue out, obscenely licking the blade of the knife. Snake kicked Joshua in the leg and shoved him onto the couch next to Grog. The first two bikers stood with dumb expressions of expectation on their faces.
"Gonna join the party?"
Wolf called to Stephanie. Her eyes were locked upon him but unfocused. "How long are you going to try to get even for what happened in the sand pit, Wolf?" Stephanie asked. The big man shuddered. His snaky eyes narrowed and deep creases furrowed his brow. "Nobody believed you," she added, her voice far away. "Not even your own mother."
"Shut up, bitch."
"They all said you killed your brother." Wolf was trembling, his mouth open, his drooping jowls quivering. "Nothing was ever the same after that, was it?" Stephanie said. Wolf growled like an animal, lifted the 12-gauge with one hand and squeezed the trigger. The gun bucked and almost jumped out of his hand. Glass in the apex exploded and rained down over the room, propelled by a whoosh of Arctic air. The standing bikers dove for cover. Joshua was trembling and staring at Stephanie. Snake and Grog were laughing. Stephanie maintained her composure and said, "Even the guards at the detention center raped you." Joshua sputtered, "Stephanie, maybe you shouldn't push." "In court, your own mother asked them to put you away forever." Wolf dropped the knife, jerked the shotgun to his hip, and pumped another shell into the chamber. Fire spit from the barrel, and it exploded, and a section of the rosewood wall splintered and flew in all directions. The next shot shattered a table. Another blew a huge hole in a section of the couch, and bits of white fluff floated and swirled like snow in the icy air that shrouded the room. Wolf screamed at Stephanie.
"If you know so much, you must have known we was coming."
"I knew the rootless would be the first to arrive," Stephanie replied calmly. "Those without ties, without loyalties, without love."
"Love?"
Wolf snarled. He grabbed his crotch.
"This is as close as it gets to love, bitch."
"Not true, Wolf. But you won't live long enough to learn it in this life."
"You gonna voodoo me, sister?"
"No. A man named Dalton will kill you, and I don't want him to. I wish I could save you, but I don't think I can." Wolf coughed and laughed maniacally.
"You want to save me?"
"Because I know why you do what you do."
"And you understand why I'm gonna skin Purdy Boy if you don't join the party?"
Wolf said, tossing the shotgun on the couch and picking up his knife. He waddled over to Garth's prone body, kneeled beside him, and jerked one of his arms out from beneath him.
"I start skinning with the fingers, and I work my way up to the more interesting places," he said.
preparing to slit the skin along the side of Garth's index finger. Stephanie stood up and walked slowly out of the pentagram. The stalker almost upon him, Dalton crouched a little lower, jamming the bumper of the vehicle into his back. A dark figure dressed in biker leathers appeared at the rear of the Suburban, stepped past, and Dalton yelled, "Right there!" The man turned, firing a 9mm Scarab Scorpion in full automatic as Dalton fired once. The steel-jacketed slug hit the assailant in the chest, throwing him sideways and backward under the hood of a 10-year-old Buick. He teetered there for a moment before sliding off, crumpling quietly into a distorted position with his arm under his foot and his head lying at an odd angle on the chrome bumper. Dalton didn't move. He glanced at the bullet holes along the top of the tailgate, then scanned the night. The stalker was a biker, and that meant he wasn't of a mentality to act alone. Minutes ticked away. 5, 10. Silence. Dalton heard a slight sound behind him. An instant before, someone on his left called, "Lenny!" The rear guard leaped into view on top of a van, rapid-firing a pump shotgun. Dalton threw himself away from the Suburban, rolling into the grill of a Toyota sedan, just as the man to his left jumped into view, handgun firing as fast as he could pull the trigger. He got off 3 wild shots before Jerry nailed him in the back of the head with the butt of the HK-91. The assailant sank to his knees and flopped face first onto the snow as Jerry disappeared back into the shadows. "Lenny!" the stalker shouted between roaring bursts of the shotgun. "Charlie!" he bellowed as the gun thundered again and again and again. Dalton hugged the grill of the Toyota as the rear of the Suburban exploded in bits of flying glass and whining metal. A tire hissed and the vehicle listed sideways. Then, in contrast to the booming bass of the 12-gauge, 2 crisp, cracking shots from Jerry's HK-91 ended the assault. The gunman fell backward under the roof of the van, and there was only silence. Not a coyote, not a snowflake landing on a metal roof in the automobile graveyard. Nothing. Dalton realized he was still holding his breath. Dalton stood up, walked over to the biker with his head on the bumper of the Buick. He picked up the Scorpion, ejected the clip, and flicked a bullet out of the clip. "Dumb ammo, asshole," he said, searching the man's pocket for another clip. He found it in an arm sling. "Dumb ammo?" Jerry asked, leaning on the Buick. Dalton flipped him a cartridge. "Silver-tipped hollow points. Good in California, but it fragments on impact. By the time it gets through a thick parka, it will have flattened and lost most of its velocity." He nodded in the direction of the van with the man lying on top. "Thanks, Jerry." "This one's alive," Jerry said. "See if you can wake him up." Dalton worked his way back to the van, climbed up on top, and retrieved the shotgun from the dead biker. The man's unseeing eyes stared up at the night sky. 5 shells were in his pocket, and the shotgun had a side saddle clip with 6 more. His leather jacket was painted with a symbol of a skeleton head with a chain going in one eye socket and out the other. By the time Dalton returned to Jerry, the third man was sitting up, swearing and spitting blood. Dalton grabbed the biker's hair, threw him face forward into the snow, and placed his boot on the man's neck. Then he reached down and pulled the biker's wallet from the back pocket of his leather pants. His jacket was painted with the same skeleton and chain symbol. Dalton slammed the butt of the shotgun through the driver's window of a nondescript sedan, popped the lock, and opened the door. The dome light came on, and he checked the California biker's license for one Charlie Jacobson of Hollywood. The wallet was stuffed with money, maybe a couple $1,000. The biker sputtered and coughed his way back into a sitting position, hissing curses beneath his breath. Dalton jerked him to his feet and said calmly, "Your friends are dead. I don't have time to play with you. Now what's this all about? And what's this about?" Dalton fanned the money.
Go screw yourself, Charlie snarled as he spit blood.
I'll ask once more, Dalton said. He placed the biker's hand on the open door frame of the car and slammed the door closed. Charlie screamed in agony, his fingers mashed in the door. Dalton opened it, and he fell backward, holding his hand. He stood up, fell against the old Buick, and scrambled sideways, trying to run. That's it, Dalton said, pumping a shell into the chamber of the 12-gauge.
Okay,
screeched the biker.
The three of us have been hitting people as they come in, that's all. The stupids are all carrying their life savings.
Does hitting mean killing? Jerry asked, bringing the assault rifle to bear on his stomach.
No, hell no. Just robbing them, that's all.
The biker leaped between two cars and began to run down the embankment and out across the open field. Jerry raised the rifle. Let him go, Dalton said. Look at his direction. Jerry looked and nodded. He'll freeze to death. Yeah, if it's his karma. There could be more of them, Dalton. He nodded in response. You take the right, I'll take the left. Let's stay on the ground for a while. 100 yards up the road, they converged on a van with a door open and a dome light on. It was empty, but lying on the floor was a sack of money. In the passenger seat were several boxes of ammunition.
Looks like the office,
Jerry said. Looks like the killing fields, Dalton said, pointing back in the direction he had come. Jerry walked through the cars to the field bordering the river. Dozens of bodies lay crumpled and scattered in the snow. Many were completely covered, only mounds of white in the Arctic cold. They broke into a Cadillac sedan with a phone antenna, hoping the owners hadn't thought to lock the phone. It took several minutes to hotwire the car. The phone was operational. 5 minutes later, hot air spewed out of the heater, and they gratefully held their hands in front of the vents, massaging the feeling back into them. Dalton called the sheriff's department and explained what had happened and told them to find Charlie Jacobson. You'll need a chopper to get in. We'll leave on several car lights, Dalton said. We'll reach autonomy within the hour, but please check on us. The sheriff's representative explained that the closest helicopter was in Missoula, and it would be morning before they could be there. Then I'd suggest dog sleds or snowmobiles, Dalton said, and hung up. How far do you figure? Jerry asked, his tongue probing his cheek. Dalton leaned back in the luxurious driver's seat. 2 more miles to the turnoff, then 3 down the road to home. He closed his eyes, and the queasy, prophetic feeling he'd experienced while tracking the ranchers returned. He could feel Stephanie's terror. He sensed a maniacal energy roaming the normally tranquil Montana landscape. Mental images of fire danced before his inner eyes. Wolves, knives, blood, and old karmic debts. The air spewing out of the Cadillac smelled like death, like the rotting bodies in Vietnam. Dalton threw open the car door and vaulted out into the March night, where a sub-zero stillness had settled over the Bitterroot Valley of southwestern Montana 2 days after New York had sunk into the sea. As Stephanie stepped out of the pentagram, Wolf was squatting with a knife in his hand beside a still unconscious Garth. Smiling malevolently, he looked up at her with narrowed eyes and gave a dry, deep-throated cackle.
Decide to join the party after all?
He snickered as he reached out and grasped Stephanie's hand, yanking her to the floor.
You want to help me to skin him?
From the couch, Snake and Grog laughed moronically. Joshua Kaufman shot to his feet, and Snake kicked him out from under him.
You get up again, and you'll never get up again,
Snake growled. The 2 standing bikers twitched in anticipation.
You gonna share her, Wolf?
Although the heating vents pumped warmth into the room at maximum volume, sub-zero air emitting through the blasted skylight was forcing the temperature to plummet. You didn't kill your brother, Wolf. I just saw it. She was on her knees, and he was hurting her arm, but she looked directly into his crazed eyes. A transient did it. Wolf let go of her arm. His jaw dropped.
That's what I told him, he said. That's what I told him.
Stephanie placed her hand on Garth's forehead.
But what good does it do me now, sister?
Wolf slapped Stephanie's hand away from Garth.
This your old man?
He's my friend. He helps me run Autonomy.
People say you're the sex guru. You screw him?
That is none of your business.
That's why we came here, you know.
Stephanie looked at him without replying.
We were in Frisco when we heard about the demise of the Big Apple and saw your picture on TV. Everybody was saying the sex guru says California's going down. We figured, well, let's not go down here. Let's go to Montana and go down on her.
Judging from their hysterical reaction, the four bikers thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. You knew nothing of me before the newscast? Stephanie asked. He shook his head.
We pounded the highway all night to get here.
And you just planned on walking in and taking over? He looked at her as if he couldn't believe she'd asked the question.
Sister, the pickings were so easy.
Stephanie looked at him quizzically. Because we had no armed security? He ignored her question and said,
We decided that this would be a real nice place to live.
Why? You share none of our values and goals.
Wrong, sister. I think maybe half of California is going to come here and visit this pyramid. And Wolf's bikers could manage your operation a lot more profitably.
What?
Of course, you get your share if you cooperate.
He reached over, grabbed the neck of her robe, and jerked, ripping the fabric. Stephanie stumbled backward, but Wolf held on to the material. As she scrambled to her feet, he jerked again, harder, and the robe fell away, leaving her standing bare-breasted in bikini panties and Roman-style sandals that laced up her legs. Whistles and catcalls filled the icy air as Stephanie crossed her arms over her chest and shivered violently. Wolf, now standing between her and the pentagram, unsnapped his belt buckle. A ghostly glow seemed to emanate from the snow itself as Dalton and Jerry made their way through the auto graveyard, sometimes walking across the trunks, roofs, and hoods, sometimes through the drifts that filled the gaps between the vehicles. Jerry walked with the HK-91 at ready, the Scorpion automatic slung over his left shoulder. Dalton carried the 12-gauge strapped across his back. His right hand was in his parka pocket, clutching the .45. A shell in its chamber and the safety catch down. He had only to drop the hammer spur and fire. There were areas where the gale force wind had scoured the vehicle trail almost clean of snow, and others where the snow had drifted so deep it buried the cars beneath it. The strange snowlight sucked the color out of the landscape, casting everything as white, gray, or black, and making it difficult to judge distance. Less than a mile from the entrance to Autonomy, Dalton heard something ahead of them. Crying? Jerry whispered. Dalton nodded. They flattened themselves on the top of a pickup camper and waited. An elderly man and woman came into view, working their way slowly through the auto maze. The woman was crying and the man was trying to comfort her. Dalton slid off the top of the camper and into their path about 6 feet in front of them. Don't be afraid, he said. I mean you no harm. The woman screamed and cringed backward, falling into the man and sending them both sprawling into the snow. Please, Dalton said calmly, I'm from Autonomy. Then you're as big a fraud as Stephanie Shaldine, sputtered the woman. Ignoring Dalton's hand, she struggled to her feet. The man stood up behind her. We didn't know you charged so much money just to enter the grounds. We don't have it. Who says we charge? Those horrible men, she said, wiping her tears with the cuff of her coat.
They said nobody gets in without paying $100 each.
Where are they? Dalton asked.
By the entrance sign,
the woman pointed. Dalton assured the couple that the men did not represent autonomy. After talking them out of trying to walk the 12 miles back to the main highway, he hot-wired a car so they could use the heater. "I'll send someone for you as soon as it's safe," he said. Approaching the autonomy entrance, Dalton and Jerry remained under cover. The sign arched over the narrow road that led to the commune. When they were 50 yards away, they saw exhaust smoke coming from a Jaguar sedan nearly hidden in the shadow of the trees. "I don't like it," Jerry said. "There are 100 places a sniper could be covering them," Dalton said, scanning the terrain from the auto graveyard to the tree cover on both sides of the road. They were crouched in blackness between an old Volkswagen bus and a new Aerostar. "I could put a slug in the headlight and let them react," Jerry offered. "No," Dalton said. "Let's backtrack and come in behind them." It took 15 minutes to complete the circle through the wooded area to the line of abandoned cars on the Autonomy Road, 30 yards behind the entrance sign. The cars were parked to one side of the road so a vehicle could still drive from the entrance to the pyramid. Dalton thought about forgetting the fee-takers for the present. He could hotwire a car and drive straight down the 3-mile road through the woods to Autonomy. He worried about how Stephanie and Garth were coping with the influx of people, especially the bikers. He hoped they'd called the sheriff. He hoped Garth had hidden the guru safely in the secret room. The fearful visions of Stephanie being hurt or killed continued to flicker at the edge of his awareness. Jerry felt Dalton's indecision. "We could take them out in 5 minutes," he said, nodding in the direction of the Jaguar. Dalton smiled. "I'd bet on 2 men in the front seat of the Jag. Bucket seats with a console in the middle so they'll have to get out different sides. We cover both sides from the trees on our bellies." "Agreed," Jerry said. "You stay on this side, move up behind the trees. I'll start it.